Hello, welcome to another Programming from A to Z course video. This video, I'm going to look at a feature of, well, really a feature of the world, the web, the browser, and look at, in the context of P5.js and JavaScript, how do you get text input from a user? So first I just want to talk you through, over here, what the 3 or 4 methodologies I'm going to use. So number one is, if you want to get text input from the user, you can use something called an input element. So an input element is a little box that appears in a browser window where you could say, in a web form, you might say like name, and then you write your name in here. You could also use something called a text area. And a text area is the same idea, it's just bigger and it's usually resizable. The user can kind of drag this corner around for a longer bit of text entry. So if you want the user to type in a paragraph of text and use that in your program, you can use a text area. And then you could also you could ask the user to submit, or you could simply load. There's so many other ways that I'm not going to get to, because you could use APIs and crawl the web and scrape it, and we'll get to that stuff later in a future video. But what I'm thinking about right now is you could also get input from a text file itself. And you could use, for that, you could use the load strings method in P5.js, where you could simply just reference an actual text file that you have as in your sort of directory of files. You could also use a file input. If you've ever seen in a web browser, you have a little button that says like choose file, and you can actually create that with a P5.js function, I think, called create file input. And I'll show you how to use that as well. And finally, you could create a div, a sort of area, a box of stuff on your screen that you could, in the browser itself, that you could drag a text file over. And I actually have a separate video tutorial that just goes over that, which I might just reference rather than include it in this video tutorial. So I'm going to go through all of these, and then you can also look at the draggable area video, and you'll see these as possible ways of getting text input, because what I'm going to do is say, hey, user, submit some text, and I'm going to generate a poem from that text for you. So that's kind of the ultimate goal that I'm going to do a couple videos from now. OK, so let me come over here, and let's see. So first of all, I'm going to start to implement some of this stuff and go over how these functions work. OK, so this is my code so far. Oh, yes, no, I'm still in the same video. I forgot. Everybody take a deep breath. I need some like calming sound. That's not calming sound, but I need some more Zen sound effects. OK, so this is my code so far. One of the things you'll notice in all of the examples that not all, but many of the examples that I'm publishing, is that even though I'm using the P5.js style, methodology, structure of, there's a setup function, which is kind of like the page is loaded function. There's a draw function, which runs this continuous loop. I actually am calling a function called noCanvas, meaning that there is no drawing canvas associated with this program that I am writing. I am simply writing a program to mess with the web page, other elements other than the canvas, paragraphs, headers, that sort of thing. So if I were to look at the output of this page, which is over here, you can see all there is a header that says welcome to A to Z week 1. Now where is that coming from? One thing I'll notice, nowhere in my code do I say, hey, display that on the page. That's because I actually have that simply hard-coded into the HTML file associated with this itself. So this is something that I'm going to touch on in this example and future examples is, when should I put something in the HTML file? When should I put something in the JavaScript file? And there's no real answers to this question. It's sort of case-by-case basis and personal style, that sort of thing. OK, but what I want to do first is just simply show you how can I create text input on the page. And I'm going to do that by saying create input. And now I'm going to run this code. Look at that. And there it is. There's a place where I can type some text on the page. Wonderful. Once the user has typed in some text, I might want to access that text in my program. So let's look at how I might do that. So first of all, this input text box that I've created on the screen, I need to store a reference to it in a variable. So I'm going to create a variable like input. I'm going to say input equals create input. And by the way, I'm actually going to take out the draw loop. There's no reason for P5 to be continuously looping right now because I'm not using that aspect of P5, which I might later, but there's no canvas, there's no animation. And so what I now want to do is I want to have access to that stuff that's in the text box. Now, when do I want to have access to it? I could have access to it in a draw loop by saying input.value. I'm going to skip that for right now. What I'm going to show you, though, is I'm going to open up the Chrome Developer Tools here to make this a little bit bigger. So let's say I type rainbow into there, and then I type input.value. You can see this. By referencing the variable .value, I have the text that's in there. So anywhere in my code, I can simply reference that text box .value, and I know what the user has typed. Rainbow, yay! Now, I might want to know what they type only when they hit enter. So the way that I can do that, and I've done something rather horrific. Well, actually, no, I haven't done it horrific yet. I'll show you later. I'll fix this later. So all DOM elements, the text input box being a DOM element, have events associated with them. When I click on it, it's an event. When I hover my mouse over it, it's an event. There is an event called changed, and there's a P5 DOM library function called changed, which allows me to execute a function when that event has been triggered. So I can say input.changed new text, which means I can just write a function called new text, and I can say console.log input.value. So what I'm saying is whenever the input box has changed, meaning the user has hit enter, I want to see the results of that in the console. So now if I go back and refresh this page and I type in rainbow, I hit enter, we can see here, I have rainbow here. If I type in unicorn and hit enter, we can see I have unicorn there. So now I am accessing the content whenever the user types enter, and I might do something like, say, create p input.value. Create p makes a paragraph element on the page, so now I can say unicorn, and I can say rainbow, and I can say swirly happiness, right? And I'm getting all of those things as paragraph elements on the page. Now, here's a question for you. What if I want to know every time the user types a key, not just when they hit enter, but anytime anything changes in that text box itself? This event is not the changed event, and this is where I've done something which I really don't like, which is that the name for that event is actually input, which is a little bit of, so technically what I need to say is something like this, but I sort of hate how I've named the variable input, and then there's also an input, so I want to rename that variable. So I'm going to just call that text field or something, and that way we can have less confusing there. I can make this a little more clear. So what I'm going to do now is say function new typing. And I'm going to say, I'm also going to do create p. So let's let's just for the moment comment out the changed event and only have the input event. So now watch what happens. unicorn. Anytime I type anything, I'm getting an event, and I'm kind of continuously making new paragraph elements for every keystroke that I type. So maybe what I want to do instead, just as an exercise here to do something different, is to, what if I had a single paragraph element that I altered the content of every time I typed a key? So here's where this, in Shakespeare, Hamlet, there's an essential question: to be or not to be? And I have a different question for you today. And my question for you, I shouldn't be erasing all this because it's a nice reference for later, but it's too late. To select or not to select. Or maybe it's just to create or not to create. To select or to create. What I'm saying to you is, when do I want something on my web page to appear based on code I write? I'm creating a new DOM element, and now it's being appended to the page. Or versus, when do I want to have something that exists on the page that I access in my code, exists in the raw HTML that I access in my code and manipulate. And here's a case where I'm going to demonstrate to you that what I want to do is I am going to, in the HTML file itself, I am going to add a paragraph element, and I'm going to give it an ID, and I'm going to call it output. Right? I'm going to call it output. And you can see that it is empty. And what I want to do, instead of saying create P in my code, instead of creating the paragraph element, I want to select this paragraph element. I want to access it so that as the user types, I want to update what's in it with the word, with the keys that they're typing. So let's do that right now. So how I do that in the code is, so I'm going to leave that in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a variable called output, and I'm going to say output equals select, and then I'm going to use its ID, and the indicator for an ID is the pound or hash symbol. Select output. I think that's what the ID I gave it. And then here, now what I want to do is in new typing, I'm going to say output.html. The HTML function in the P5 DOM library is a function you can call to access the existing content of a DOM element or place content in it. And what I want to do is I want to take what's currently in the text field and I want to put that in that paragraph element. So let's look and see if this works now. And so as I'm typing, cannot read property HTML of null. So I've made some sort of mistake here. Here I am back, and if you were wondering what was wrong, I forgot to hit Command S in my index.html file, meaning it wasn't saved. So now that I've saved it, the code works as expected, or as I wanted it to, which is I can say hello every time any character that I type here. You can see that that paragraph element is being updated. And now when I hit enter, you can see that I am also saving that with, so I have two events that I'm tracking, each key being pressed and enter being pressed. Now, a couple other things I want to mention. One is if you want to have this pre-filled in with some text, then one thing you can do is you can, in this create input function, you can say this, like enter your favorite food or something, or just say like your favorite food. Right, and I could then say, blueberries, because I love blueberries. I love blueberries. Okay, they make me so happy. Oh, I wish I had a bowl of blueberries right now, and I could just do this sort of weird internet thing where I eat blueberries on the internet. Okay, so you could see that you can have some pre-filled text in there. I could also make this a text area instead. So what I want to do actually right now is number one is I'm going to show you two things at once. Whereas, first of all, instead of saying create input, I could have actually just put an input element in the HTML file and use select to access it. You can try doing that as an exercise for yourself. And what I'm going to do in this video is change this. I'm going to actually add a text area, and I'm going to give it an ID, which is, I'm going to call it text field. I'm going to say text area. And you can see now if I refresh this, you can see there's now a text area that I can expand over here. So if I wanted to type a paragraph in here, and I could also actually precede it with some text, please type a story. And you can see now it says please type a story there. And what I'm going to do is in the code, I'm going to comment this out. Instead of creating the input, I'm going to say text field equals select, and text, and the ID is text field. So I could probably think of better. Blueberry, I'm going to call it blueberry. And I'm going to go back to the HTML, and I'm going to say, give it an ID blueberry, and I'm going to say, tell me about how much you love blueberries. So that's in there. You can see that's in there. And now you can see this same program works. The only thing is that event enter is no longer relevant. So in this case, I should probably create, let's do this. I'm going to go to I'm going to actually just create a button element, and I'm going to say submit, and I'm going to give that an ID, which is submit, and then I'm going to go to my code, and I'm going to say var submit, and I'm going to say submit equals select, submit. And by the way, I'm doing a terrible job. I'm single quotes, double quotes everywhere. All of you can argue on the internet, single versus double quotes. I'm just going to use them both. I don't care. And I'm going to say submit dot mouse pressed, which is an event new, and I'm going to say new text. So when you click the submit button, I'm going to call the new text event, which will create that new paragraph. So mouse pressed is an event for when you click on a button. So I should be able to do this, and you can see da 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 da, and I can hit submit, and I get this is how much I love blueberries. Okay, so oh, it did it twice. Why did it do it twice? Mouse press. Oh, because I have the. Oh, interesting. Oh, maybe when I hit tab or something. I have this, no? Oh yeah, text field change. So that event is still in there. Maybe it's somehow figured out. I don't know. I don't know why that happened. Yeah, by the way, someone needs to write a command S for save song. Okay, anyway, I finished with this video. Okay, so this is the end. By the way, here's a little exercise, technical exercise for you to do. And I'm going to show you how to do this as I make some video tutorials about how to manipulate strings. But basically, the next thing you should think about is how can you, instead of just reproducing the exact text that is in the text area or text input box right there on the page, how could you manipulate that text? So how could you show the user back what they've typed, but reverse the order of the characters, or reverse the order of the words, or replace certain words with their synonym? I mean, that's, connecting to an API or something. So you can come up with some clever idea. This is a kind of a technical exercise that you could try. Okay, thanks for watching this video about how to get text input from the user using an input field or a text area. In the next video, I'm going to actually show you how to load from a file using load strings or the create file input. Okay, thanks very much, and I'll see you in the next video.